someone there who's searching for you, and it's time that you believe he's gonna find you.
Well, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on this Thursday evening. I think all the days are blurring into one these days.
It is Thursday.
It is Thursday. Excellent. I wasn't sure. For our what is almost weekly episode of Two Guys Fix the World Live. So, Ryan, what are we fixing today?
Well, what we are fixing today is standby election fixing. We are fixing election fixing.
We're fixing election fixing. Oh, actually, I didn't do the regular intro. My name is Mark Davis Stahl, and this is Ryan Jans. There we go.
We normally comprise a band called It's All in the Mind, but when we do those shows, we're not allowed to talk politics, which is something we both rather enjoy talking about a lot. And this is our outlet. Otherwise, we'd explode.
Indeed. Right. It's actually hi Shalim for joining us, and we got I think Sandy has joined us, but I don't see the last name. Hi, Sandy.
Sandy Postma, a former student that. Not of mine, but we were students together growing up in a Calvin Christian school in Winnipeg. And another friend of mine, Rial Gauthier, who's come out to a number of our shows and has been a good friend of mine for a number of years, has joined us. And also our the good friend of both It's All in the Mind and this show, Two Guys Fixing the World, Shalim. Hola, everyone.
Oh, and Stephen Privets joins us from the UK. He's my childhood friend. I've known him, we've been best friends since we were 5. And we were chatting actually earlier today. So it was a lot of fun. So it's like 3 o'clock in the morning there. So looks like you're staying up tonight. Well, thanks for joining us, Steve. Okay, we're actually going to be touching on a lot of different topics there, and we usually try and we'll skim over a few, but we end up by going too deep into some. So we'll see how it goes. Lots of different areas, and the first thing is election fixing, but with specifically the nasty pieces of legislation that get snuck through when we're going through crisis, such as we are now. And the first one that, if those of you who are have liked the Fixing the World, Two Guys Fixing the World Facebook page, or been following us on Twitter, will have seen me post this. Was that last week, I think, or the beginning of this week? Was actually the Manitoba government, the Manitoba where we live right here, have actually proposed some changes to the pre-election blackout rules, trying to sneak that in, but hopefully no one was noticed. Thankfully, we've got an NDP party, for those of you in the UK, that's similar to the Labour Party, who are standing up and stopping that going through and being, which is kind of good. But what this actually means is we've got fixed elections, and we've had fixed elections here in Manitoba since 2008, and they've actually, and so there are some fixed blackouts rules there that you can't then start promoting yourself as a politician, and it prevents the government from having an unfair advantage in the election. So before this, there was a 90-day blackout, and the Manitoba government want to change that to 60 days. So, what do you reckon, Ryan?
Well, I think that's just exactly the kind of thing that you would try and sneak in when everybody's busy and preoccupied with other things. It doesn't even have to be a massive healthcare crisis. We see governments trying to sneak in capricious legislation all the time. It could be anything, anytime, anywhere. As long as they got you looking this way, they'll try and just sneak something in.
That is often the case.
So and the whole point of us having multiple parties and legislations is so that people can't abuse that situation. Now, advertising sooner than later, I don't know. I feel like there's a part of me that's upset, and so automatically I want to say that it's bad. But then I wonder, does this actually hurt you in the long run? Or could this actually backfire on you by advertising earlier, if you're allowed to advertise earlier?
It's not a matter of you're allowed to advertise earlier. This is something to limit the power of government. Of course, you can push your political party all the time. There's nothing stopping you as a regular citizen running for office. The 60-day blackout is so that you cannot act as an MP or a member of the legislature, and from your official position in government, just a campaign from there. Because it's a ridiculous, unfair. It is an unfair advantage.
All right. Yeah. So I think that's where my misconceptions were coming in. Yeah, that does lead it up to an abuse of sort of a privileged position. Yeah, that just seems like it's a very bad idea.
Yeah. Well, particularly when that was before the last election. We had election, was it 2019?
Yeah.
At the end of 2019. And the Progressive Conservatives got in for a second term. And while they were trying to get in for the second term, they were desperate to get the waiting times for the emergency rooms numbers out. And I think that's probably a big push where they shut down 2 of 5 or 3 of 6 emergency rooms, which is great. We're really enjoying that now with the armed guards in hospitals because everyone's desperate to try and get in. So they wanted to get that out so they could say that, well, the numbers of people waiting in the emergency rooms have gone down. The reality is that they've renamed some of the emergency rooms and taken away some of the equipment and called them urgent care. So that's number fixing. And the numbers have gone right down because there's nowhere to go. Anyhow, so it's that kind of thing which you could, we'll probably be another year or two before we see any real numbers or any real statistics there. But you can spin out those numbers just like I did. I had to make them look bad. They can spin those to make themselves look good.
Anytime you have a percentage, you got to be careful when someone starts talking percentages because percentages are easily, they sound impressive. So for instance, I'm going to pick on photo radar here stuff because it's so easy. This is a blatant abuse of this idea of what percentages can represent. We're justified in putting a camera at a corner of pick your street here because there was a series of deadly T-bone collisions at that area that cost either people were seriously injured or hurt. And that constitutes a number. And now that we've put the camera in there, those numbers have dropped 100%. Well, if you don't have a time scale on how frequently that happens and how frequently that kind of accident happens and what kind of injuries, and if you don't have all the details, that sounds like it's really effective. You reduced deadly T-bone crashes by 100%. Well, if you only had one every 10 years and you're in year 6, you haven't done anything. It's just a statistical aberration.
Actually, it kind of reminds me of, was it the last U.S. election? I think it was last year's election, but Jeb Bush was saying, I remember my brother, there's not been any attacks on the US since his secured us, made us more secure. But 9/11 happened on your brother's watch. Like you just the way you're spinning it. Anyway, it's kind of sounds something like that, right? But the first part of the first 6 months of your term was pretty awful.
Exactly.
Nothing's happened since.
So and those numbers can be easily manipulated by either side. Right. Exactly. You could say that I mean we're easily picking on the government because that's what governments do. They put themselves on the chair, and so that puts a big bullseye on their back. But opposition can really abuse those as well and present something that is completely untrue. Yep. So the truth is, if your government puts out numbers and then your opposition puts out numbers, you kind of have to play statistician and look at those numbers and say, well, it's probably somewhere in between, right? And it's and all of them are full of half truths and this and that. So you kind of have to sift through. But I don't know. I love this kind of stuff, but there's times when I read through stuff like that, and I just sit there like, and just want to give up because it's all just thrown out there, and it's just meant to look everybody look bad. Yeah.
That's actually.
And so really,
yeah, so there was a phrase, just something that I guess I see Steve's name in the list there, which just reminded me, cast my mind back to when we were teenagers. There was something we used to say, and we'd just say it because it was funny. It was not because we were making a point, but that's as look. You see that was as fast as greased squirrel shit. You say I didn't say anything. That's because it was that fast, right? Or words to that effect, right? Yeah, you can make arguments. Sometimes you can floor them immediately, and sometimes you just laugh at them. Anyhow, yeah. So I think that these things are. I think you had asked a question earlier there, Ryan. Was is this likely to backfire or come back and bite you? Well, this kind of thing it already has, right? When you try and change when you're in power and you try and change the elections to benefit you when you're currently in power, incredibly short-sighted. It was Franklin D. Roosevelt. Actually, it was in his second term, and the Republicans. And when was this? I forget. I didn't write the year down.
It's right around the Second World War, right about the time.
So there was a whole load of reforms and the New Deal and everything else. And because people loved him, because they took him, he took the people out of the slump more than the slump, but the Great Depression in the 1930s. And of course people loved him and they wanted to keep voting. So he'd actually got a second term and a third term, and they're like, hang on a minute. He ended up actually later getting a fourth term as well. And so the Republicans pushed through this legislation to limit terms to 2 terms. Now, the funny thing was, I remember this, it would have been 90s, I guess, was late 80s, early 90s, was Ronald Reagan was really, really, really popular. And the Republicans were all beside themselves because they could have had they believed they had a third term coming with Ronald Reagan. And it's really, we did this actually offline, what was it, on Saturday, you and I were talking about this, Ryan. And there has been no instance of a party who's had 2 terms who have, with a new president, have gone on and taken a third term as a party, right? It hasn't been since. So it's really bitten them up the bottom. So yeah, these things can really hurt you. Now, the laugh is, I mean, this is a bit of a sidebar. I think in Russia, laws have changed so Vladimir Putin can take on another term, right? So that he can squeeze that in. Now, there's uproar, right? Because the US has 2-term limit. No other, as far as I'm aware, correct me if I'm wrong, there is no other Western democratic system that has a term limit on their leaders. In Canada, the Prime Minister can be Prime Minister as long as he can get voted in. Same in the UK, same in, I believe, in all of Europe as well. So it's kind of ridiculous that they're arguing about that. But when you try and restrict it,
I think the only restrictions, and I didn't dig deep into this because it didn't seem like it was. It just seemed pretty clear that they're. Whoa, shoot! I lost my train of thought. Okay, it's back. They might have like term limits in terms of like, okay, from A to B, you can only govern for 5 years. In Canada, it's 4 years it's now 4 years. It used to be 4 years with the option to go to 5, and then you have to call it in year 5. Most places have some kind of operation like that. Yeah. But for instance, if you are the prime minister in your first term, and your term expires, you can become prime minister again, and then you can go for a third and a fourth. That's how we had like 15 years worth of Jean Chrétien. So he just kept getting elected. So it didn't really matter. Yep. So, and that's perfectly legal. Yeah, the U.S. is like the only person. Comment from Shalene: Reagan had 2 terms. The term for
Bush the first had 1. Yeah. So if we misspoke, I was talking about Reagan, or at least I meant to that Reagan. They wanted to give a third term.
Yeah, they wanted to give a third term to Reagan, but then they realized that the man was senile.
No, they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it because they changed the Constitution.
Yeah, that's right. So they'd have to actually go in there. But I mean, I think they were smart enough to realize that no, it's not good. We probably shouldn't have him run. So yeah, they had no choice but to put Bush in, and Bush the first got there. But he did not, interestingly, get a second term. Bush the second did, and I don't know if we're all better off for that. So definitely not.
Well, I don't think the point, actually, my point certainly wasn't arguing one way or the other. My point was, if you make legislation to benefit you while you're in power, it's going to bite you in the backside and because you're not going to be in power for very long. I mean, even NDP, we had one for 17 years. I mean, that's a long time, but they stopped being in power and now we got the Progressive Conservatives in Manitoba. You're not going to be in power forever, and now you're giving an advantage to the other guy. It just seems to be ridiculous. So it's a ridiculous place to put yourself in such a disadvantage. It wasn't that funny, Ryan.
No, it wasn't. Apparently, I can't handle my Diet Coke this evening. So,
actually, Schlingan has a comment. Term limits is a great idea. Too many politicians and governments do first and foremost what is best to get them re-elected. They see that it is a test to show that they are doing what is best. Of course, this is not the case. Actually, he's got a few comments there. Chrétien was the last PM to get 3 consecutive majorities.
Yep,
I think thankfully,
not dispute that at all. Yeah.
Bush the first would have won re-election were it not for Ross Perot.
Ross Perot.
Yes. Yeah. Ross Perot, who talked to himself in the third person, right?
Yeah,
as I recall. Anyway.
Oh yeah. H.S. Ross Perot.
Yeah. Anywho, right, there we go. Back. So, right, so those of you who are joining us, joining us late, my name is Mark Davis. This is Ryan Jans with me. We're two guys fixing the world. And we are actually going to move on and we're going to continue on the general topic. What the Manitoba government is trying to rush through the legislature right now. So, same topic, kind of different things. So while we're in a panic mode, I'm going to outline what's going on there. So the 3 main parties in Manitoba, which is the Progressive Conservatives, the NDP, and the Liberals, are all have agreed to meet to pass COVID-19 related legislation. Of course, the Progressive Conservatives want to also squeeze through 8 or 9, I've written it down, 8 or 9 other pieces of non-emergency legislation as well. Let me see if I can quickly outline what those are. There's 8 pre-existing bills. So part of that includes temporary to close the public hearings on Manitoba hydro rates, which is actually controlled by the public, a third-party watchdog. And they want to close that for several years, but it'll be temporary, like all temporary laws ever end. Of course they don't. Now, to put that into perspective, last time there was a rate hike, the government wanted to raise it to 7.9% increase, but it ended up the watchdog said, no, and it went out to like 3-something%, right? Just to give you an idea. So we save a lot of money by looking after itself. And the side point as well is that the current government has been taking the money from Manitoba Hydro, which is our electric company, by the way, not the water company, for those of you who are not familiar with that. I still have trouble with that. And they're taking the money, which is supposed to be self-sustaining, and they're taking some of the profits and giving it to other parts of government funding, which they're not supposed to be able to do. So that's why they like to hike up the prices. While they're cutting taxes, they hike up the electric price. So that's one of the things. The provincial government wants to... I'm just repeating myself. Okay, so
they want to transition the annual Public Utility Board hearings into a multi-year process, which would save taxpayers money. I doubt that. It probably looks like we're saving money, but by changing something mid-stride, it always costs more money to shut it down and to restart it up again, rather than just going through with what you already had. Yeah. So if you already spent... if your budget was $1 million and you spent $250,000 or $500,000, half your budget, and you decide to pull out, you've only saved the money that you haven't spent, right? There's no way to recoup the money that you have spent, so you might as well just see it through and live out your budget. It just doesn't make sense to transition out into a multi-year process. And even when you think about that seems counterintuitive as to what progressive conservatives really would want. Public Utility Board hearing, wouldn't you want that over and finished quickly? That would be the easiest, the most way to save. multi-year process, coming back and revisiting issues or agenda A, B, C, D over 5 or 6 or 7 years, that just seems like it would cost loads more money in the long run.
Well, for
And
us,
I can't even,
for those of us paying, yeah.
yeah, and the problem is it's a public utilities board. So guess where they're gonna get the money to pay for these hearings? It's gonna come out of you and me. So whatever we save up front by doing this multi-year thing, we're gonna lose on rates to increase on the public utilities, right? So it really isn't gonna do anything.
Yeah.
In fact, it's gonna be a lot worse.
Yeah, for sure. The NDP is also concerned that legislation that would give the government-appointed adjudicators the final say over building and occupancy permit disputes. Something the government needs is more power, and let alone the last word. And now, I'll not say that any of this legislation is necessarily could necessarily bad. It could be good legislation if it's written well, and if there are numbers around it. But the thing is, it's being rushed through, and there's no time to debate it and to dig into it. And
that part, I would agree. That statement is 100% correct. I is concerned about legislation that would give government-appointed adjudicators. Well, government-appointed adjudicators already have the final say over whether a building occupancy permit in disputes, whether that's municipal, provincial, or federal, depending on which jurisdiction your building inhabits. Generally, the way those authorities having jurisdiction work this way through is usually the city, even if it's a federal building, it still has to adhere to local and provincial building standards and could be subject to federal standards depending on the type of building. So for instance, I'm going to give you a quick rundown. I'm trying not to be too technical here. I work in the fire and life safety business. In Manitoba, we use CAN ULC S536 as our inspection standard. And that's based on the 2004 version of that particular piece of code, which has been legislated. That's how we're to inspect and do stuff in fire alarm. The latest version is 2013. So in Manitoba, we have decided, the Office of the Fire Commissioner, in conjunction with the City of Winnipeg, City of Brandon, all the major cities and AHJs have adopted the 2004 standard as law. But if you have a federal building within any of those jurisdictions that's owned federally, it is subject to the 2013 standard. Now, there actually isn't really a whole lot of changes between the two standards. There's some verbiage changes and a few things here, but overall, they basically say the same thing. But that's they already have the final say. If there's permit disputes and it's because you haven't pulled a permit or you didn't operate within the permit, they have the right and should have the right to not let you occupy your building because it could be unsafe. You could have done something improperly in the building process. There's reasons that they have that those entities exist. Now, whether they're, I don't know what the legislation is. It could just be refining powers. It could be defining them better. It could be saying that, who knows? I haven't read the legislation. So I don't know if that necessarily is a bad thing.
Right. And that's Rob Canoe, who's the leader of the NDP. I know you know Ryan, but other people in different countries won't know that. That's the provincial government, which is very similar, I guess, in some ways to the state government. If you follow U.S. politics at all, probably not a exact, but there's a good simile. He was concerned by the omnibus bills in the budgets that's being pushed by the current progressive conservative government, and rightly so. There have been a lot of to get the budget through. You need to put the budget through so the government can function, so the money can get allotted to the right places, and because you bundle all these other bills that are not related to finance at all, and they all get passed as a single piece, rather than judging each piece of legislation on its own merits. You've got to judge it based on this money's got to move.
All of it.
Yeah. And so almost all is one. And then you start amending it. It becomes a nightmare. And in this particular case, for this set of legislation, they haven't, at the time the article had reached the press there as a few days ago, they had not, the opposition parties had not seen the legislation. So they haven't even had a chance to kind of look through it. It'll be read. They're not going to be able to have a preview. And then they want to do this in a matter of days. So that's the big thing. They want to rush it through 1, 2, 3 days, which the COVID stuff, it needs to be decided now, right? It's an emergency. We need that now. I don't think we need to worry about the increase in price on hydro now. Let's leave it as it is for a little while until things are calm.
And you see, the thing is, I think I can already sort of predict why they're trying to go with this whole hydro thing. They're wanting to. I mean, let's call it a spade here. Like, it's going to cost money, and it's going to be very costly. Everybody's economy is going to suffer. We're not unique to that. Certain industries here might bounce back faster, but everybody's hurting because of the COVID outbreak. End of story. And it's going to cost money. And that means we're probably not going to run at a balanced budget for the next 4 or 5 years. We're probably going to be paying this off for a long time. But the difference is, when you offer those services, you have a population that can bounce back. You have people who aren't going bankrupt. You have people who are being fed. There's childcare spaces.
No, we can
all
talk
these
about
things, right?
No, we can talk about government. We can talk about government debt in another show. It's nowhere near as bad as it's made out at all. It is not a scary place to have for the government to have debt. It's scary for me and you to have debt because we can't tax. We can't invite new people into our house and tax them over several generations, right?
That's right.
When actually, well, I'm going to start ranting about. I'm
Yeah,
going to rant about this. This is not the show for this one.
Right. That's a great. Two guys will fix the debt later, or the debt.
Yes.
Debt delusion.
Deficit. Yeah. Whatever. We'll figure out a title. Yeah. Right. So just a reminder to anyone that's been just joined us. We are two guys fixing the world. My name's Ryan. My name's not Ryan. His name's Ryan. My name's Mark. David Stallard. This is Ryan Jans. And we are fixing this awful legislation that is not very snappy, is it? We're fixing the awful legislation that gets put through during crises or other times when you're not looking. Yes, yep. Nailed it. Well, by the time I'll think about this for a couple of days and I'll rename the video later when we're sober. Okay, so that's the provincial items. There's a couple of things that are happening similar. Kind of similar in the federal government. And the first one on my list here is Conservative leader Andrew Scheer is calling for a temporary, wait for it, the Conservatives, what are they going to do? They want to temporary increase the donation tax for 2020. Now, sounds fine. Then you can give more money to charities that are suffering, that are taking part in the COVID, where everyone's suffering from the finances, and so giving to charities is a good thing. Now, who does this benefit? Does it benefit charities? Possibly. But it does not benefit the people who are laid off, who are, or are unemployed, or who are sitting at home, the average worker, even the people who are working. It doesn't help them hardly at all, because you might give $10, $20, $30 for a tax, for a charity. But the people at the top, they're going to give hundreds, $200,000 to a charity, and they won't pay any taxes on that. The last thing we need right now is to reduce the government revenues to pay for all these other things. Like we're getting, well, I'm not, but $2,000 a month. That's going to be paid for somehow, and you want to give away revenue. It's akin to, I've got a hole in my roof. My wife's pregnant. 2 of my children are going to college, and you go to your boss and say, "Can I have a pay decrease, please?" It's the same thing, right? Yeah. Anyhow, so
that's pretty much it.
So I probably talked all the way through that. Any comments on that one, Ryan? You got me started on that one, right? You got me started.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Down, boy, down. Take a deep breath.
Drink of water.
Breathe in, breathe out. Yeah. That tax credit or that donation tax credit. Yeah, you're right. Even right now, okay. So my job is considered to be essential. My wife is still working from home, not full time, but she is still able to work. So we don't need to apply for any CREB or CERB or whatever it is. And we're happy about that. I have a lot of stress now when I go to certain clientele, but I mean, I can deal with that because I still get a paycheck. Here's the thing. Between my wife and I, we still, like, we've made some donations to some charities, but not a ton. A couple $100. Maybe. I would say maximum. And I'd have to ask her, is a couple $100 maximum.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Maybe it might be getting close to $500, maybe but that would be the absolute max, right.
And I just put that in perspective. The tax that you would, so that then would be non-taxable under the current rules. 50% of that would not be taxable, but with the new ones, 75% would be taxable. Well, not, yeah, we would not. You would only be taxed on the 25%.
Yeah, and so what am I going to get on 75% out of, like, at
the
more realistic number is probably like $250.
Yeah,
right.
But that's the tax, right? That's not, you don't get that back. That's the that is now tax. You're exempt on tax on on that money. So I'm going to
apply it against
6-7%
income tax, right? And all that jazz, but.
Yeah,
but at the end of the day, it's not benefiting me. No. But if I was able to drop $250,000 to, like, United Way, well, that's a different story altogether, isn't it? Now that makes a huge. That's a huge saving for me. And if I'm able to offset $250,000, well, let's think this through. That means I've got a lot of money, and I've now probably effectively put myself down a tax bracket as well.
Yeah.
If I've donated that much.
Yeah. Actually, that's a good reason to do that.
Which is sort of a legal way to, like, now I've made a way to not pay the tax that I should be paying. And I basically told everyone that, hey, look at me how good I am. I give $250,000 to my to the charity of my choice. They do whatever they do with it, because I'm not particularly too fond of some charities. Some charities are extremely good, and they need to be supported. Some are a little bit more shady and probably deserve an episode. Two Guys Fixing Charities. Or not for profit. I think we should be clear. Not for profit. Charities are a different organization altogether, and I think most charities are trustworthy. Not for profits are where you have to be very careful. So Two Guys Fixing Not Profits. Watch your invites. That'll be a show for later.
Sounds like a big one. May not be next week.
I'm reducing my income. I'm not a multimillionaire anymore because I've given away $200,000 on paper. I'm now only $750,000 rich, and I've effectively taken myself down a tax bracket probably.
Yeah.
So
I'm not sure if that's actually financially, if that's numerically possible, but it definitely is a good reason, right?
I'm just throwing numbers out here. I don't think anybody who watches the show realizes that. I'll make very simple things.
No, I have to write numbers down, put them in the spreadsheet so I can see the formulas and all that kind of stuff, because numbers all just blur into one for me.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's what it leads to a point we made earlier in the video. Percentages and numbers can be easily manipulated, so you kind of have to take them apart. So don't even believe me. You can correct me. Call me out in the comments if I've made a wrong statement.
Usually the crowd that watches this often does.
Yes.
Yeah. Slip of the tongues and everything else. So so something that's kind of think through. I'm going to stop beating up on the Conservatives. Let's beat up on the Liberals. So the Liberal MP offices have put out an advertisement, and it's actually party related and not government related, but they are MPs, and they've actually released a this ad, and it actually, here we go. So these are Hedy Fry from Vancouver Centre, Jonathan Wilkinson, North Vancouver, Harwich Sejan, Vancouver South, and Joyce Murray, Vancouver, all together put their faces on this nice party-related advertisement and put the Government of Canada logo right on the bottom. That is illegal. And being federal Liberals as they are, have completely they don't care. They're not going to take it down. They're not going to change it, and they're completely unapologetic. There you go.
Yep. And that is pretty.
Yeah.
One has to really think about what's going on with the federal Liberals, and I guess it's not really too far to think because their leader has done some ethically questionable things. He's been in front of the ethics commission about taking rides in private helicopters and planes and stuff like that, vacationing on islands of very rich people. And he's been hauled out to the ethics board, and the ethics board basically said you shouldn't have done that and kind of left him alone. And when you set that kind of precedent, it's not a surprise that you see stuff like this happening.
Yeah,
that is because your leader has already set that. Now I'm not particularly fond of Justin Trudeau. I think he's still better than some of the other people that are out there. But I want to make it very clear. There's some things that he's done that I'm very disappointed with. And stuff like this, call your MPs in, man. Like, seriously, you've done something that's blatantly illegal.
There we go.
You've got to call people to task for that. Suspend them. Fine them. Do whatever.
There we go. Sorry,
yeah, there we go.
So I was looking a little distracted. I was just pulling the image up there for everyone. And there it is. We're here to help during the COVID-19. And by the way, Government of Canada has endorsed them. No, they haven't. Yeah, so lots of flack.
And you'd think that is a dangerous thing to be doing when you are in a minority government situation like the federal Liberals are now. You are not in a situation where you can easily manipulate the law or pass a bill to protect these people. They've blatantly broken the law, and you don't have the parliamentary support to keep them out of trouble. Not that we're condoning that that's the kind of thing, but I mean, thinking like how government officials think, that's the kind of thing that they do, right? Hey, we're the government. We'll just sort of find every loophole and backdoor that we've written into this to keep it out. But there's no way that you're going to be able to do that in this situation because you are in a minority government. You have to somehow convince another party that the blatantly wrong act that you've committed wasn't that bad. So I don't understand what they were thinking.
Yeah. Well, because they're actually arguing saying it's not partisan, it was a public service ad.
Non-partisan, then put some other MPs from other parties on there.
Yeah, or
and then you solve the problem.
So there. I mean, look at the ad. Look at the ad, right? It's during these challenges times, your local MPs are here to serve your constituents. How the hell is that a government? That's obviously partisan, right? So yeah. Look at us. Vote for us again. That's what that says.
Yeah, exactly.
There's nothing there to. Is there? I don't know if that's the whole ad, but I don't know if there's any contact information on it. To be honest with you. Anyhow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just having a look at the article there. Yeah.
So interestingly enough, this was something that I stumbled across an article as I was sort of half preparing for this and just out of stuff. I stumbled across this interesting thing. And this is U.S. politics, but I obviously I have to take a look at it in light of Canadian politics too, because we live in Canada. It's interesting that the United States president, it's unclear in their constitution whether or not he can be convicted of crime while he's sitting in office. He can be convicted of after or before. But interestingly enough, it's not clear whether or not he can be charged with a crime. Now, in Canada, we've got links that we'll post at fixingtheworld.ca, where we post all our resource information and places where we're pulling these opinions and some of these facts. The Prime Minister of Canada can be convicted of a crime. He can't be convicted of a crime if it's directly related to legislation. But if he were to commit a crime that isn't part of a political motion, he would definitely be 100% on the line to answer for that. The U.S., it's not clear. So the reason why you had things like the Nixon Watergate and why he got pardoned by Gerald Ford is they were going to convict him, and that meant he was going to lose the presidency, even though he had just won the presidency. So he basically resigned, and then told the vice president, who became the president, pardon me so I can't get sued criminally or civilly because I've been pardoned. I have a presidential pardon. So that was why they had that sort of thing. And another interesting little tidbit is...
Nope, he froze.
The recently nominated Judge Kavanaugh... I had some internet stuff here. I've been locking up a lot. What was the last thing you heard me say?
Yeah, it was like a few seconds ago. We didn't move as much. The picture froze and then you went quiet. But yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. So the judge, the recently elected Supreme Court Judge Kavanaugh, wrote, interestingly enough, just around the election, the first set of election time for President Trump, the 44th section or the 44th president, whether or not he wrote an opinion piece. So this isn't law. Okay, so let's make this right. He wrote an opinion piece that said basically that a sitting president shouldn't be subject to civil or criminal lawsuits. So basically, they're immune and above the law. And that's the kind of legislation, when we talk about stuff being slipped in, that's the kind of legislation that can be easily be slipped into, and you'd never know it. You'd never know it until somebody tried to actually stop somebody from doing something, and they came back and said, oh, no, we passed this in, it was right at the height of the COVID-19 thing, right? Yeah, we passed it in. We called a quiet session. We had a vote. Congress voted it in, and now the president can't be sued. So yeah, that's the kind of thing. Canada, we're smart enough. He can be convicted, and my very quick research did not reveal any time anybody wanted to repeal that or change that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's another show. Remind everybody you're watching Two Guys Fixing the World. Mark Davisard and Ryan Jans with me, and we are fixing some really odd. Oh, actually, I think we've pretty much. Actually, there's one more thing. There's a couple more things I want to touch on. But while we're on this topic, I think we'll skip down one there, Ryan, to the New Zealand Prime Minister takes a huge pay cut while Trudeau approves MPs' pay raises. It's kind of funny that. Now, ordinarily this wouldn't make the headlines, but it's because here we are in the middle of a crisis, and I probably wouldn't really think too much about it. Yeah, it is a bit tacky, but what's even tackier is that MPs, so this is the federal MPs, have agreed to give their pay raises to charity for this year. They're still going to have it for upcoming years, and that again, it's just more money. That's but it just seemed a little tacky there. Just why not just freeze your pay? We're not asking you to take a pay cut, right? Yeah.
So here's the thing: is it goes to show you that we really lambasted the provincial government. I think. There's a number of shows back where they talk about, hey, we're going to come in and we're going to give ourselves an immediate pay raise, and then we're going to freeze things.
Yeah, we're going to freeze for minimum wage for the lowest earners, right?
Yes,
but
that's right. So they went and froze it after they gave themselves a raise, right? Is really there's a lot more details like you were just waiting, but that's the crux of the matter. And as you can see, it doesn't really matter if it's the Liberals or the Conservatives. politicians just sort of like to vote and say, hey, we'd like more money. Sure, give us more money. Hey, people are going to be outraged by us getting more money because they already think we don't do anything. Let's just sneak this in while we're making some other legislation. See, it all just kind of ties together, right?
Yeah.
So, and as you can see here, we got other prime ministers and other jurisdictions around the world that are saying, hey, you know what? I don't need $400,000 a year or $350,000 or $200,000 a year to run the country. While the people who elected me are suffering or either stressed or sick or in some cases dying. I don't need to take this pay cut. Here, go buy masks. Go buy.
And it's not that the amount of it is. I mean, I'm not sure how much. Didn't look to see, but it could be as much as 20 grand each or 10 grand each a year. And don't forget, they're going to be getting it next year, along with next year's pay raise as well. And it's not really that. It's the tackiness of, while people are losing their jobs, well, the economy is tanking. And it's not the government's fault directly. We can argue they could have done a hell of a lot to mitigate this years and years and years ago. Horrible system that we're in and all that. But it's the optics of it, right? Look how they deserve their pay raise, even though they don't need it. And it's not like they're spending money on travel, right? They get expenses, but all expenses paid free. Anyhow, it was a bit.
Yeah.
Now,
and then you can have like a senatorial hearing about expenses and go to forced arbitration, which are all topics for another show.
Yep, for sure.
So,
now, one of the things that seems really kind of sneaky, although it's got it did pick up a lot of press, so I'm sure the audience has heard this. Maybe they haven't, but a lot of global news had a piece on it, National Post, for sure. Actually, those are the two mainstream ones. And, of course, Al Jazeera, which pretty much reports on everything. All saying the same thing, is that Justin Trudeau has approved the sale of military equipment to Saudi Arabia. Woohoo! Now, it was all... you'll recall the murder of, what's his name? Canadian...
Jamal
I'm not even Jamal Khashoggi.
I would totally get that wrong. Anybody who's watched any of our shows realize that me saying names wrong that's my thing.
Yeah, we do apologize profusely, unless you're a horrible person. And I don't think no one's been that horrible.
No, nobody.
And the ones that are horrible I can pronounce, so that's bad. Anyway.
No. Nobody. Okay, I'm going to go on the record. Nobody who's been on our show, who watches our show, who I have said your name wrong. I cannot conclusively prove that you're a horrible person. I'm just terrible.
No, sorry, I was again right a little sidetrack there, but I was talking about the people we're talking about, not the people that are watching us. So, or deeply, deeply sorry when we do mess up your names. And we do so, and we'll keep apologizing, even though it's kind of annoying when people apologize for saying names wrong.
It's just a Canadian thing to do,
right? So this actually kind of went through really quick. Was there's actually quite a little deep thing if you want to dig into it. It's kind of almost maddening, and it's almost as if Justin Trudeau was stuck in a corner. But the long and short of it is that Saudi Arabia have an atrocious human rights record. They crucify people on the streets. They were beheading women for driving, I think. I got that wrong. Maybe she was just imprisoned. But we're talking capital punishment for tiny things. And that's not to count that they are actively bombing and committing war crimes, bombing civilians in Yemen with Canadian military equipment. And it's been proven that even though they claim, oh no, our equipment's not being used in Yemen and these other places, in fact, some of the watchdogs are saying yes, they are. Now, this is a $14 billion contract to export light armored vehicles, and made by a Toronto-based company called General Dynamics and Land Systems. Now, it was the the deal was brokered in 2014. Justin Trudeau, when he took power, I think ratified it is the right word, but finished it off.
They basically completed it so that it became law.
There we go. Completed it is a better word than finishing it off, because that has other connotations. But no, as I'm looking at this, I'm just really, really pissed off at this, thinking, well, we're supposed to be peacekeepers. Although if we could probably go into how little peacekeeping and how much imperialism we've been involved in as a nation in another episode. But I was actually kind of disgusted. Well, because it was such a public thing. They dismembered this person in the consulates in Istanbul, the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, and was brought light to, or at least attention to, these other issues. Now, what's actually going on in the background is a rather complex free trade kind of deal, like a trade deal. Mm-hmm. Now, if Canada had stopped it, Saudi Arabia could potentially sue Canada for billions of dollars. How insane is that? Is that we can't? I mean, it would be like the British saying, "Oh no, sorry, Hitler, we're not going to keep this contract for whatever we're supplying you for because you're atrocious." Oh no, but they can sue us for billions and billions of pounds. Right? Why are we allowing ourselves into these kinds of deals? It's beyond. It beggars logic.
Yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And there was it just really makes me scratch my head. It's like, is he trying to cut out like this whole U.S. oil thing? Is he trying to, in a roundabout way, snub his nose at the U.S. because we've been paying inflated oil prices for way too long, and Saudi's got a lot of oil? How do you even sleep at night saying like, okay, well, Saudi Arabia is going to flood the market so we get cheaper oil and we can import export a lot easier with them, but all it cost was, $1 billion worth of military hardware and the lives of people in Yemen. And that's the part that gets me, is like that you would even consider trading with somebody who would for whatever reason has justified the idea of bombing human beings. Oh wow, I've got a funny face.
All together now. Okay. Yeah, you got to drop MTS. MTS internet's horrible.
Yeah, no, I'm not particularly too fond of them at this moment in time. Not because I look like an idiot. I don't need their help making it.
Yeah, maybe if I.
Yeah, there we go. I'm just gonna.
There we go.
You go ahead, Mark. I've done my rant. I'm gonna tweak my video settings here, so I'm not.
Yeah, actually, I just flipped between the between the Chrome and the OBS. So I think that maybe that's what froze it. It might be a coincidence. But yeah, feel free to tweak. We're good. Now, one of the other things that, and I'm really kind of tired of hearing this too, is the argument was, oh, this could be hundreds of thousands of jobs lost. No, it's a stupid argument, because the Canadian military also need light armored vehicles. We have someone they could potentially sell them to, and that's one of the critics. Not critiques, but one of the critics that said this. I'm trying to find how much the jobs are, but I didn't write that particular stat down. I just got a little annoyed when I saw jobs. Well, okay, well, as long as someone's got a job and they can pay their rent and buy cable, let's murder a few 100,000 civilians, men, women, and children. Bomb hospitals and whatever else they're doing. Anyhow.
Oh yeah. And just their human rights record, Saudi's human rights record, like it's something like right out of a spy novel, where it's like, hey, I don't like the government, and that guy's gone like the next day. You'll never see him again. You'll never find the body, because that guy's not. They're not just putting him in prison. They're just, he's dead, right?
Yeah. You
don't speak out against like the Shah in Saudi Arabia or whoever it is in control now. You don't. And the idea of like gender roles and strict, very orthodox, conservative religious beliefs, to the point where you're not allowing women to drive. Like, that just is beyond. That's beyond even the most. I know some very conservative right wingers, and every one of their wives drives. Like, that's like, every single one of them. So it doesn't flow. It's
Yeah.
and for him to come out and be like, in the beginning when he first was elected, and he's got like shirts that is like, this is what a feminist looks like, and I believe in a feminist, and I've got a humanitarian wife, and I think that they mean well, but then all of a sudden to turn around and do a backdoor deal like that, that's got to make some awkward conversations across the table at Redo College right now, because here's his wife, who's outspoken humanitarian, and I think has the greatest of intentions, and he just essentially sold weapons to a warlord.
Yeah.
And just wow is all I can say.
Yeah, and even from a moral point of view, selling weapons is an odd thing to be selling, but it's also odd, particularly how fickle the world is and can be. That why would you sell weapons to somebody who could potentially be an enemy in 10 years, right?
Yeah,
it's kind of a thing.
I want to put a point in. Yes, they could be in there. Shalim has posted a great comment, as he often does. Saudis are not exactly a shining example of human rights champions. It's okay to criticize them, but you can't say boo about Israel, who also violates human rights. You have no idea.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%, Shalim. That absolutely has to be said. And there's something about this right-wing conservative Christian movement that's in the West that says Israel is like the promised land, and yet they have no problem beating the hell out of people, imprisoning them, raping, doing all these things. And then they have the media resources to say, hey, look at how bad these Palestinians are. They're throwing rocks at us. Like, man, you've got like a carbine in your hand and body armor. Like, and they're throwing rocks. Like, you can't oppress these people any more than what you're already doing them. You treat them like garbage. You pen them up like animals, and you're surprised that they're revolting. You're surprised that they're throwing rocks at you when you batter them. You're surprised when you treat them like garbage, that they're acting antisocial. Like, yeah, okay, you know what? I have a faith background. I understand what Israel means to people in their faith. Modern Israel is not biblical Israel. All right? Let's clear that out. That's not it. And I don't think you can find in Scripture, if you read it objectively, that that's how it should be, because it's absolutely not. It flies in the face of like so many Levitical laws. It flies in the face of like so many different, even commandments.
International
like, it just
law.
doesn't make sense.
There's war crimes going on there. And I just wanted to
that's
actually,
exactly what it is.
we are a bit off topic, but I think it's kind of worth saying is I can't really speak about what the Jews are expecting with the temple, but Christians are expecting the Temple Mount to be built once again on Mount Zion, hence the term Zionists. Just a little playful fact: Mount Zion isn't where the Temple Mount is. That's Mount Moriah. Mount Zion is on the other side. It's the mountain opposite. There's no temple on it. Go build one there. We don't need this fighting. So the whole joke, we always find that's hilarious. You're on the wrong mountain. Go over the other side of the city. Anyhow, I don't know enough about all of that to really comment any more than that.
Yeah,
my Bible school, my Bible school education taught me something.
So, I know lots of amazing Jewish immigrants, people who've immigrated here. I know lots of Palestinians and different types of immigrants who've come from that area of the world. All just people trying to make their way in the world, just like the rest of us. Come over here to a place that's safe. We'll take you.
Oh.
Please come.
Okay, so we have one more thing. I think we probably could have ended there, but there's one more I kind of want to kind of talk about, and is the we as in Canada are getting hold of some useful, necessary things, like what was I? Oh, like protective equipment for the people on the front lines, like masks, gloves, and so on. And then we need to get those across the country. So rather than use the fairly efficient Canada Post, Justin Trudeau has decided to sign a contract with Amazon. You know, Amazon, the ones that make people pee in a bottle rather than they're not allowed to take breaks. Particularly, I mean, we have laws in Canada that they don't have in the US, but this is happening in the US. No,
but I'm pretty sure he's in violation of labor laws. You have to give people breaks. You have to be able to allow people to go to the washroom.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the US, how it is. Absolutely in Canada, yeah.
No, in the U.S. labor law, you have to allow. So, for instance, building codes stipulate that you have to have bathrooms based on certain amount of occupancies in buildings. You have to be able to allow people access to bathrooms. It's a basic human right. You have to be able to allow that. He just chooses to ignore it, and because he's got all the money, people don't challenge him on it.
Right. So I'm going to read a little bit. This was in the Global Mail. So Amazon workers. This was it. Titled Trudeau makes deal with Amazon. With Amazon to distribute medical equipment. We'll post all these links after the show.
So about it, fixing the world.
So here we go. So here's a quote. Amazon workers are happy that they have work, but what that announcement means in turn is that they will be physically pushed to do more under unsafe working conditions, said Ganandeep Kaur, who a postal worker and organizer with Warehouse Workers Centre, a Brampton, Ontario-based organisation, helping those in the warehouse and logistics sector. Core, C-A-U-R, and the centre recently started a petition signed by more than 450 people claiming that Amazon is failing to protect our health. And the petition alleges Amazon, which employs tens of thousands of people in Canada, has fulfillment centres in Ontario, British Columbia, Alberta, Manitoba, and Quebec, is refusing to give workers paid leave. And the he continues. The government made a deal with Amazon, and they never commented on the compensation of workers. She said, "I'm not happy about that. They actually are keeping a blind eye on it." There you go. I could go on, but that kind of gives and they're now being, and some of them are being forced to work 50 hours a week or more, and they're saying it's unsustainable. Go read the article. It's not surprising. And I am surprised that stuff's going on in Canada, to be fair. I knew that the horrible stuff was going on in the US, but when I saw this, I hadn't realized it was that bad here in Canada.
Oh, it's, So essentially what it's come down to is this. I'm going to use this as a great segue. Shalima said Amazon should be taxed properly. Shame on Jeff Bezos. I was like, if tax evasion and improper taxation is Jeff Bezos' only crime, he is so far ahead of the game right now. That man is like a Dickens antagonist. This guy literally wouldn't care if you drop dead in his factory. Like, he's that callous and that cold, and he has that many political connections that they just wouldn't care. I'll find someone else to work for the pennies that I'll shell out. Well, I make millions. Shove it away and not pay taxes on it. And it just if he's only hit for tax evasion, he's so far ahead of the game. So far. This man, as we had talked about, Amazon not letting people literally pee in their water bottles because they won't allow them to go. Now, you could make the argument that in the next couple of weeks, you're going to have a lot more time and you may have to miss a bathroom break, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't have access to a washroom. Now, this is normal working conditions at Amazon, apparently, is you don't have access to the washroom. So there's a very fine line, and I hope he doesn't say, hey, it's an emergency. You guys should be working harder. There's people dying here. It's like, yeah, well, when you say that from your yacht in the Bahamas with all the medical gear and hand sanitizer, toilet paper, and disinfectant wipes that nobody else can buy, well, I hope your boat sinks, you jackass. Don't ask me how I really feel about that.
Yes, I was going to, but I won't know.
I don't. That kind of I am very centrist political. I believe that there's a certain amount of a marketplace, but that needs to be regulated, and that this guy represents everything that I absolutely hate about the capitalist system. That guy is capitalism's worst and embodied in a person right there. Like when you can almost work your people to death in a year where, in a century where we have labor laws, we got labor unions, where we have human rights and ways to protect people through law, and he just blatantly disregards all that and says, "I don't care. If you don't pee in the bottle, I'll fire you and find someone else." Like that is just like the worst. Like that's President Trump awful.
Yep.
Right there.
Yes, indeed. Now, what's kind of what's funny about this was my first thought was Canada. What the hell's wrong with Canada Post? But there's a quote, same article by Matthew Green, or a quote from Matthew Green, NDP critic for National Revenue, Public Services and Procurement. "We have an incredibly hardworking team at Canada Post that handles national logistics every day. Privatization can't be the answer." Yeah, so this is now the article does say they're doing it for they're not doing it for profits. Like, yeah, right, sure they're not. It is actually a big foot in the door to push out Canada Post, I'm sure, right? I mean, whether or not, I think it's more of a case that Trudeau doesn't want to be responsible for Canada Post staff getting sick, which is a fair enough concern. But why would you why would he not be responsible, if not legally, at least ethically, for the employees of Amazon that we are paying to do this?
Yeah, and you know what? This sounds suspiciously like a lot of backdoor legislation, which seems to have been a theme here on this episode of Two Guys Fixing the World. Yeah. Hey, you know what? We're going to legislate that I want you guys to go home because I don't want you to be sick. Look at me. I'm such a good leader. I care about my federal employees. By the way, Amazon people, come on in. You can sit here. Yep. And hey, how about this? Purelator, why don't you guys sit here? And Federal Express, yeah, you guys come in here. By the way, this is only temporary because everything in politics is temporary, always is temporary, right? Go back 20 minutes into our show here, and you'll find out that it's not. Let's move in all these for-profit things. Do you think they're going to even for a second get them out? Not a chance. This is just another backdoor piece of legislation, and it's not even being legislated. Backdoor decisions on a crown corporation from the top end management. I mean, I haven't seen stuff like this since the Harper days. Yep. It's that bad. I've just compared Justin Trudeau to Stephen Harper.
Yeah, working with a Dickensian slumlord, or well, maybe selling war weapons of war to mass murderers. Yep. Wonderful. Let's tally it all up. He's not looking good, is he? In what we've touched on this show whatsoever. Yeah. Okay. So I think Shalim has a couple of other things to say there. We'll just Amazon should be taxed properly. Shame on Jeff Bezos, indeed. He also says removing money from politics would be great. Feel the burn. I think Byrne removed himself from the running as well. Maybe we'll discuss that on another show. We try and stick to Canadian politics as a rule, but we can maybe do a little bit of analysis on Bernie. So I'll wait till the dust settles before we touch that one. Speaking of the post office, Shalim says Trump doesn't want people voting by mail because they will allow millions of people who normally don't vote to kick his butt out of office. Now, I might not put it that way, but when the voting, when a lot of there's a high vote turnouts, the left or the lefter parties do better. When there's little turnout, the more conservative right wing parties do better. So that's true. So why would you want to make it easy? But then why would the Democrats? We're talking about the US now. Why would they make it easy for their own to elect their own candidate for president? They don't give a crap. Anyhow,
nah, they don't. They really don't. It's outstanding to see how okay, so I saw, what was it? Is it like a video, or no, it was an article I was reading. I don't remember where it is. I'll have to dig it up, and if I can, we'll post it at fixingtheworld.ca, where we post all our resources and information about our show. I don't know if it's a news clip or if it's just an article. President Trump was saying that it's not good. There's way too much chance of fraud for mail voting, and the person who was interviewing him or asking the questions basically said, well, in the last federal election, how did you vote? Or where did you vote from? Oh, I voted from Florida. And how did you do that? By mail. So, by his own admission, either he's committed fraud or it's not that bad and he just won't admit it. And that it's just like, are you kidding?
Yeah.
I don't know how it goes. And it just is outstanding to me.
Yeah.
And
you know what? That's why what's really funny is we got these things. We buy things on this. We transfer money. We access our email and all other kinds of personal stuff. This can be pretty secure if you've got the right apps installed. Why can't we vote from our phones? In fact, why can't we vote on every piece of legislation on our phones? Why can't we instead of people representing us, why can't we just vote for ourselves? We can do it now, right? It wouldn't take that much to do it. We would just need to make sure that people are educated on what they're voting. And people are. I mean, the trouble is, and one of the reasons I'm doing this is that a lot of people just gone to sleep. They don't care. Politics doesn't affect them. But really, everything that you do and everything that you see is affected by politics. And if you realize just how much it affected you and how much it will change your life, is going to change your life, you would be a hell of a lot more interested, or they would be a hell of a lot more interested than they are. We have to be active, but the trouble is, we need to be able to jump in and we need to understand what's going on with clear facts without all this partisan garbage. Anyhow, I'll be ranting on that in future shows as well.
Yep.
Anyhow,
so in case we haven't raised your blood pressure enough, whether or not you agree with this or not, please don't throw your beverages at your computer screen or TV, or throw your smartphone because we've said something that offended you. But you're welcome to join us. As you can see, we will criticize people where they've done wrong. We will praise them where they've done good. I was just re-scrolling through things. Do I agree with the NDP that some of these things should be bad? No. Or like the concern, I agree with the NDP that they shouldn't be trying to push through legislation all at the same time, but some of that legislation that they're fighting against, I'd have to wonder, is some of it actually good legislation?
Yep.
Right? I've said that in the past. I'm not a huge fan of Trudeau, but I think he's done an okay job. Well, I think I've changed my my stripes with that. So, and we haven't even really touched on Andrew Scheer.
Yeah.
And
yeah, well, he's on his way out as well, thankfully. But who knows what horrible thing is going to that was that horrible person is going to follow him. He was easy to make fun of because he was a bit of a dolt. He would say such stupid things. Anyhow, well, we will lay into him. It's almost like it's low hanging fruit. It's just too easy, right?
You see, and that's the difference. But that's kind of the difference between Canada and US, where we're going to lambaste our leader for being an idiot. The opposition, we sort of like, lost,
well,
so.
It's just too easy, right? I mean, I had another channel I was working on for a while, Harperland. It was political satire. You go check it out there. I might do some more cartoons at some point, but I didn't really want to do anything with Trump just because everyone else was doing it. It was just too easy, and it's really boring now. You've even got commentators that are, citizen journalists like us, if we may call ourselves that. I don't really think of myself as a journalist, but that will end their show and they'll start mimicking. It's like, really, you undermine your argument there. It's not funny. You're not very good at it. Let's just let's treat this what it is. It's serious. Let's not make fun of them for anything other than the things that are worth mocking. mocking the individual, the person for its personality is stupid. It just breeds sympathy. Someone with horrible ideas that try to get through horrible legislation that don't deserve our sympathy.
Yeah. You'll notice that we never once commented on his bad suits, bad hair, terrible tan, or any of those things. We knocked him for...
I'm sorry. You can criticize Justin as much as you like, but he's a darn good-looking chap and well-dressed with it.
Yeah, exactly. A well-dressed bad idea is still a bad idea.
Okay.
No matter how you make it look, a bad idea is still a bad idea. It's not a good idea to sell weapons to warlords. Let's just put it that way.
No, it isn't.
So,
not at all.
I don't care how good his hair looks or how distinct he looks now with a beard with a little bit of gray in it. That's still a bad idea.
Oh, yes. Yeah, when I go grey, I'm going to go grey gracefully. Anyhow, so thank you very much, everybody. It's been actually a lot of fun. We've actually touched on a lot of different things, which was great. We didn't get too deep, I think, as we often tend to get up to our next internet before we realise where we are. And we're going to hopefully try and keep this up for the live shows as well. So I think next week we'll do another one, and if lots happen, maybe we'll do one, maybe one or two between then. Well, we'll see. But we will leave you there. Thanks, Ryan. It's been great as usual.
Yeah.
And thanks, everybody, and especially Shalim, who has had lots of inputs. Thanks so much, Shalim. It's been a pleasure. Steve, and I'm missing the other names. Everybody else that joined us.
Sandy and Riel were the other two people who joined us this evening. So
right. Thank
you all for joining us.
Okay. Thank you much. Goodbye, and we will see you next week. Oh, actually, we'll see you on Saturday. The Invisible Man. We've got Black Eyed Susie on. No politics or religion. Just fun. Just music. Just laughs. Check that out. Theinvisibleman.ca. Anyhow, got to plug our own stuff. Okay, thanks a lot, everyone, and we'll catch you next week. Bye.
He's gonna find you.